It was 10 years ago. Southern California was paralyzed by fear. 4 people gunned down, a bloody 9-day manhunt ending in flames. In the suspect's crosshairs, one of the nation's elite police departments, the LAPD.
Control all units, feed info, reference 1199 for LAPD.
Over the past 24 hours, a deadly manhunt across this whole region.
Suspect vehicle still outstanding. It's a black Nissan Titan.
Police officers hunting one of their own, a rogue former officer now accused of hunting them.
Of course he knows what he's doing, and we trained him. He was also a member of the armed forces.
He was a commanding officer of a reserve unit. And again, he blames the LAPD for losing that Navy career.
It all started Sunday with a grisly double homicide.
You have 2 patients. The suspect is still outstanding and are using caution.
We are learning much more about the couple found shot to death in a parking structure in the 2100 block of Scholarship in Irvine.
In the beginning, it was a mystery. A double murder in Irvine. The victims, 27-year-old Keith Lawrence and his 28-year-old fiancée, Monica Quan.
Shot at close range as they sat in their car.
Quan and Lawrence were found dead from multiple gunshot wounds inside their car in the parking structure of their condominium complex.
Today, we have identified Christopher Jordan Dorner as a suspect in this double homicide.
33-year-old Christopher Dorner, a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy Reserves, honorably discharged just last Friday, fired 4 years ago by the LAPD. Police claim he bore a grudge against a retired LA police captain, Randy Quan, Monica's father, as well as other LAPD officers.
Of particular interest at this point in the investigation is a multi-page manifesto in which the suspect has implicated himself in the slayings.
In a rambling manifesto posted online, Dorner blames Quan and other LAPD officers of a smear campaign after Dorner reported witnessing a fellow officer commit police brutality. The manifesto vows vengeance. I will bring unconventional and asymmetrical warfare to those in LAPD uniform, whether on or off duty. There are indications he may have reason to be angry. I'm not an aspiring rapper, I'm not a gang member, I'm not a dope dealer, Dorner writes in his manifesto. I am a man who has lost complete faith in the system when the system betrayed, slandered, and libeled me. The manic account of his firing given in that manifesto is told more soberly in court documents filed in connection with a wrongful termination suit. In both, Dorner claims the LAPD fired him after he reported having witnessed his superior using a taser on a mentally ill suspect. Then he said seeing the superior handcuff the suspect and kick him in the chest and face. The suspect, Christopher Gettler, and his father offered testimony corroborating Dorner's account at the time, but the father now says he wasn't surprised that the review board ended up rejecting Dorner's claims.
I even told him, I go, what is wrong with you? You know, you don't testify against your fellow officer. That's the Three Musketeers. You know, what were you thinking?
The official grounds for Dorner's firing, providing false testimony in an investigation. The police chief at the time was Bill Bratton.
I really have no recollection of his particular case. He would have been fired by me, and then in that I was chief of police at that time and would have had to approve his discharge.
Dorner's multi-page manifesto makes it clear he's armed and has nothing to lose. He writes, "Self-preservation is no longer important to me. I do not fear death, as I died long ago on 1/2/09. That was the date he was fired from LAPD. He says, the attacks will stop when the department states the truth about my innocence publicly, and no one grows up and wants to be a cop killer.
Among the more chilling statements in the manifesto, when the truth comes out, the killing stops. But today, LA police rejected any suggestion they review his allegations.
It is not going to happen.
Dorner's manifesto indicates he is prepared to die. If they do manage to find him, don't be surprised if the LAPD obliges.
If you read his manifesto, this is a very, LAPD is a specific target, but all law enforcement is targeted.
It appears to be no idle threat. At 10 o'clock last night, police say a man fitting Dorner's description tried to steal a boat in San Diego.
He pointed a handgun at the victim, who's an 81-year-old male, and demanded the boat.
1:25 a.m. Police officers acting on a tip exchanged gunfire with a man they believed to be Dorner. The officer was grazed by the bullet, unable to pursue. 1:45, Riverside. 2 more officers on a protective detail ambushed. 1 killed, the other seriously injured. By sunrise, jittery LA police officers opened fire on this blue truck in Torrance, similar to the suspect's vehicle. But the people inside were just innocent bystanders.
12:20 p.m., a 911 call from this cabin. Two women who arrived to clean the home surprised Dorner, who was holed up inside. He tied them up and stole their car.
Do we get a physical on the guy? What is he wearing?
Dressed in camouflage and armed, Dorner drove down a mountain road. He opened fire on Fish and Wildlife wardens in pursuit.
The suspect took his weapon out, stuck it out the window of his vehicle, and shot our game warden 5 times.
Get him eastbound, we will pick him up.
Dorner crashed the car, then carjacked Rick Heltebrake.
He pointed a gun at me, big long assault type rifle. I stopped my truck, put it in park, raised my hands up. He said, "I don't want to hurt you, just get out."
But Dorner quickly dumped that second vehicle. On foot, deputies chased him into the woods.
We have the suspect holed up in a cabin.
1:15 p.m., another volley of gunfire. 2 deputies are hit, 1 is dead.
Another officer down.
Copy, another officer down.
Hundreds of rounds are exchanged between police and their suspect.
Guys down!
A CBS News crew was just yards away from the firefight. The SWAT team arrived on scene. Tear gas was fired through the window.
It's the one with the smoke. The one with the smoke is the target cabin.
An armored vehicle was called in to knock down the walls. The cabin caught fire, possibly caused by the tear gas grenades. Dorner was still inside. Police heard a single gunshot.
Inside the residence.
It would have been crazy for law enforcement officers to have gone in and tried to confront him inside the cabin.
The week-long international manhunt for Christopher Dorner ended overnight in a blazing inferno and a hail of gunfire.
And how fed up we are without that old compromising sweet talk. Stop sweet talking him. Tell him how you feel. Tell him what kind of hell you've been catching, and let him know that if he's not ready to clean his house up, if he's not ready to clean his house up, he shouldn't have a house. It should catch on fire and burn down.
Disclaimer. Serene Eminence's spiritual explications are not abdications of responsibility on behalf of the perpetrators in question, yet are instead intuitive avenues through which we may thoroughly explore centralized afflictions and expose the overarching principalities operating through the soul along its quest towards calibrated reconciliation. As such, I do not condone the slaughtering of innocent civilians, nor the calculated execution, dare I say, assassination of individuals in positions of power, of whom inherently embody righteousness, integrity, and dignity. Yet I do very well know that the boundless bloodshed shall ceaselessly flow and subsequently erode the structural integrity of our collective consciousness if the roots of systemic issues are not conscientiously and comprehensively addressed. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming. Salutations, Serene Eminence here. It's a pleasure to delve into the defense of Dorner, diving into the dimensions of his thoughts as we discover the true derivatives of his ever-evolving vengeance.
Ready. Fight.
A warranted wrath exacted by a man of whom intently decided to defend his honor against unwarranted character assassination by a faction that he once devoted his unwavering honor to. He was systematically gaslit, mentally mangled, and spiritually executed by a paradoxical system, whose principles he was once entrusted to not only staunchly uphold, but unflinchingly enforce. This compounded cataclysmic concoction operated as the catalyst that encouraged the resultant mission-oriented massacre to unstoppably ensue. A lethal legacy that left the ex-Navy reservist and law enforcement officer reportedly along his trail of purposively executed sacrifice. He fixedly sniped the lives of a retired police captain's daughter, haphazardly adding her fiancé to the casualty count in the process, and as declared via his manifesto, unconventional asymmetric warfare descended upon the LAPD, leaving 2 policemen lifeless and 6 individuals wounded. If issues that stem from systemic corruption continue to be swept under the metaphorical rug, we might as well roll out the red carpet, sit back, and watch as the resultant unrelenting disharmony destructively ensues. Because when the justice system knowingly, yet seemingly unsuspectingly, behaves unjustly, the afflicted shall feel forced to take justice unto their own hands, tragically collecting countless casualties along the way. Now let's sip on our sumptuous libation of choice and delve into the seething siege that ragefully manifested itself in direct response to Dorner's incessantly suppressed attempts to thoroughly rectify his slain character. We shall commence with Dorner's penetratingly revelatory manifesto and his unreconciled concerns, moving forwards towards Dorner's training and experience as both a Navy reservist and probationary officer in association with the LAPD, as well as the catalytic incident that incited the vengeful Rampage. Communing with the manifestation of his manifesto as we traverse along the timeline of the massive manhunt, viewing surveillance footage captured of Dorner along his mission and hearing accounts from injured parties, hostages, and those hijacked alike. We shall be concluding with uncertainties regarding Dorner's cause of death and the suspicions surrounding authorities' decision to set Dorner's final resting place ablaze.
The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants.
And this manifesto on Facebook is 11 pages long.
First, I want to show you how long this manifesto is. I spread it out here over the desk. We're talking about 19, 20 pages here, and in it, he writes a lot of things.
The following are Christopher Dorner's words. From Christopher Jordan Dorner to America. Subject, last resort. The question is, what would you do to clear your name? A name is more than just a noun, verb, or adjective. It's your life, your legacy, your journey, sacrifices, and everything you've worked hard for every day of your life as an adolescent, young adult, and adult. Don't let anybody tarnish it when you know you've lived up to your own set of ethics and personal ethos.
He writes, I'm off the grid. I assure you the casualty rate will be high, and continues. Unfortunately, orphanages will be making a comeback in the 21st century. He threatens, you are aware that I have always been the top shot, and I will utilize every bit of small arms training, demolition, ordnance and survival training I've been given. He says, "In my cache, you will find several arms. All of these small arms are manufactured by the Cerebus Freedom Group, the same company responsible for the Portland Mall shooting and Sandy Hook massacre." He also makes it clear he wants an automatic weapons ban. He says, "Why does anyone need a suppressor? Why does anyone need an AR-15? And he states, "Are you aware that I obtained Class 3 weapons without a background check?" He claims he used a notarized trust and military ID to buy those weapons. Lastly, he blasts the NRA's president, calling him a, quote, "failure of a human being."
And he promises more violence, too. It's really scary. We know that he was trained on these guns as an LAPD officer, of course, and he was also in the Navy. He writes about that Navy career in his manifesto.
17, 18 pages long in that manifesto. What's he say about the Navy in it?
He knows weapons. He's a rifle marksman, pistol marksman in the reserves. He's been very well trained. You know, LAPD, some of the best trained officers in the country. He was there from 2005 to 2008. And I tell you, this manifesto, it scares the hell out of me.
You better have all your officers, radio, phone muster on or off duty every hour on the hour. You may have the resources and manpower, but you are reactive and predictable. Goes on. I have the strength and benefits of being unpredictable, unconventional, and unforgiving. How do you stay one step ahead of this guy? Because you have to think, not only does this guy know what the officers are doing, he knows how they're responding to him.
He does, and he knows about the Metropolitan Division, which is their elite unit with the LAPD that includes the SWAT team. And these are the men and women who are out there protecting the higher-ups in the LAPD, from serious injury or death because of this guy. They're the ones who are out there doing all the protection. And I tell you what, from the sounds of his manifest, it sounds like he's also extremely well armed.
The officer, I'm looking down at my notes from when I was listening to the news conference, multiple weapons at his disposal, including assault rifles. Manifesto says violence of the actions will be high.
Right, and one paragraph, it says, the violence of action will be high. I am the reason TAC alert was established, which means, TAC team. But at the bottom of that, this is what scares me, Brooke. It says, I also own Barrett 50s, so your APC are defunct and futile. APC means armor-piercing, armored personnel carriers, and the ones you saw, this is the bullet. This is the bullet this is the bullet from a 50 caliber. This is the kind of bullet that you use in a Barrett. I fired a Barrett before. It's extremely lethal. Its lethal range is almost 2,000.
Legal to get your hands on one of these?
Yeah, it's a rifle, and some people own them, very, very expensive. But if he has access to one of them, that's not good. He knows what the capabilities of law enforcement are because he was one for so many years. It's extremely, extremely scary. I haven't seen a case like this, I don't think ever, where you've had someone like this who has written a manifesto, has threatened to carry out all these acts of violence, and could have the capability of doing it.
I'm a military service member. I'm a man who has lost complete faith in the system. When the system betrayed, slandered, and libeled me. I lived a good life, and though not a religious man, I always stuck to my own personal code of ethics, ethos, and always stuck to my shoreline and true north. I didn't need the US Navy to instill honor, courage, and commitment in me, but I thank them for reinforcing it. It's in my DNA.
The Navy SEALs stands for sea, air, and land, which identifies the elements in which they operate. SEALs work in small units, often 1 to 2 men, but sometimes in a platoon comprised of up to 16. They are trained to perform specific tasks under any type of circumstance and in any environment. Navy SEALs have a history shrouded in secrecy. SEALs were officially formed in 1962 and were soon engaged in spy missions and river and combat tasks in Vietnam, and participated in Operation Phoenix, a program to assassinate village leaders sympathetic to the Viet Cong. Commissioned in 1962, they are the most elite shore area special forces in the world, concentrating on very select and often clandestine intelligence gathering and precision strike missions. For over 50 years, it was assumed that the origin of the Navy SEALs was the Naval Combat Demolition Units and underwater demolition teams of World War II. In reality, The Navy's special warfare activities started in August 1942. It takes over 30 months to train a Navy SEAL to the point at which he will be ready for deployment. The SEALs that emerge are ready to handle pretty much any task they could be called on to perform, including diving, combat swimming, navigation, demolitions, weapons, and parachuting. The training pushes them to the limit both mentally and physically in order to weed out those who may not be able to successfully complete the demanding missions and operations with which SEALs are faced. The types of stresses they endure during basic underwater demolition are the same stresses they will endure as SEALs. If they can't withstand it when lives aren't on the line, chances are good they won't be able to withstand it when lives are at stake.
The former Navy reservist and expert marksman was fired from the LA Police Department back in 2008. In the manifesto, Dorner claims he was treated unfairly by colleagues and threatens to kill 24 police officers. He also writes this directly to George Zimmerman, quote, "If you continuously followed me while I was walking at dusk/night, I would confront you as well. Too bad Trayvon didn't smash your skull completely open, Zim."
When I saw that, I was just shocked. I couldn't, I literally didn't believe that was, coming from him. I didn't, when I heard everything, I'm still shocked, and it's just a crazy feeling. I couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it.
I know most of you who personally know me are in disbelief to hear from media reports that I am suspected of committing such horrendous murders and have taken drastic and shocking actions in the last couple of days. You are saying to yourself that this is completely out of character of the man you knew who always wore a smile wherever he was seen. I know I will be vilified by the LAPD and the media. Unfortunately, this is a necessary evil that I do not enjoy, but must partake and complete for substantial change to occur within the LAPD and reclaim my name.
Dorner's mother. And, well, here it is.
This mom, whose son is an LAPD officer, we're protecting her identity because, unfortunately, she and her son are targets right now. So I'm just going to refer to you as Mom because that's how you are best known. So tell me how you are feeling about this story right now and the search for this man who's coming after law enforcement officers like your son.
Well, yes, thank you. Initially, my thoughts and prayers are certainly for the families of those who've been victimized by these senseless acts. We're seeing this at all too great a frequency, and I find it very disheartening. Secondly, my concern is for my son and, of course, his colleagues and co-workers. But at the same time, I'm a woman of faith, and my faith sustains me in all things, and this is no different. One thing about faithful people, they're called to serve. And I think it's no surprise that my son would choose a career in law enforcement as a civil servant.
And, I know as a mom, you are always concerned about him because he works for the LAPD. He's out on those mean streets on a daily basis. Now he's one of a number of officers that's a target, including families like yours. And I'm just curious, what's he saying to you? How is he telling you as a mom, don't worry about me?
Well, he does tend to reach out at times when he's particularly at risk, but he's trained, and he's well trained as an LAPD peace officer, and he fully understands the risk associated with this line of work. And again, when I was talking about service, it comes from a long line of civil servants, whether it's the military, healthcare, church ministry, and law enforcement. And he fully accepts, the risk associated with what he's doing. He has support, family support, and I think that's most important in times like this. My thoughts are for all of, again, his co-workers who are probably, obviously concerned about their welfare and that of the city.
Nancy Dorner's statement says,
It is with great sadness and heavy hearts that we express our deepest sympathies and condolences to anyone that suffered losses or injuries resulting from Christopher's actions. We do not condone Christopher's actions. The family has no further comments and asks that our privacy be respected during this difficult time. I told Nancy Dorner, and I'm most curious whether LAPD is going to stick to their word in looking at Dorner's case now that he's no longer here. But it also should be really noted that I don't view in any way Chris Dorner's actions as heroic or anything other than it shines a light on an issue that is completely separate from what he did. I'm looking at the issues that Dorner raised, not at the actions that Dorner has done in the last week.
Looking again at that manifesto, is this also an explanation for the roots of his anger? These are being called revenge killings. Does it begin with his dismissal from the Los Angeles Police Department?
Self-preservation is no longer important to me. I do not fear death as I died long ago on January 2nd, 2009.
He was fired in 2008. And he was fired because he lied about a fellow officer. He claimed that that officer beat up a suspect, and the department found that he lied about that and fired him.
One of the things I always respected about Chris was the fact that he was a person of very strong convictions and a person with a lot of integrity and honesty.
What other code of ethics did he live by?
Chris, as much as anybody, you know, he believes in right and wrong. And if you do wrong, you should be punished. And if you do right, you know, you should live your life that way.
In August 2007, I reported an officer, Officer Teresa Evans, now a sergeant, for kicking a suspect excessive force during a use of force while I was assigned as a patrol officer at LAPD's Harbor Division. While cuffing the suspect, Christopher Gettler, Evans kicked the suspect twice in the chest and once in the face. Nothing was done. I had broken their supposed blue line. Unfortunately, it's not just us, it's justice. In fact, 10 months later, on June 25th, 2008, after already successfully completing probation, acquiring a basic post certificate and intermediate post certificate, I was relieved of duty by the LAPD while assigned to patrol at Southwest Division. It is clear as day that the department retaliated toward me for reporting Evans for kicking Mr. Christopher Gettler. The department stated that I had lied and made up the report that Evans had kicked the suspect. I later went on to a Board of Rights department hearing for decision of continued employment from October 2008 to January 2009. During this BRO hearing, a video was played for the BRO panel where Christopher Gettler stated that he was indeed kicked by Officer Evans. Videos sent to multiple news agencies. In addition to Christopher Gettler stating he was kicked, his father Richard Gettler also stated that his son had stated he was kicked by an officer when he was arrested after being released from custody.
Being interviewed and tape recorded with his permission is Christopher Gettler. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you about the police contact that you had with the at the DoubleTree Hotel. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember being taken into custody by the police?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Do you remember whether there was a struggle?
Mm-hmm.
And during that struggle, were you kicked in the face?
Mm-hmm.
You have to say yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember how many times you were kicked in the face?
Once.
Okay. And do you remember where you were kicked in the face?
Right here.
Okay. And do you remember who kicked you in the face?
An officer.
Do you remember what sex? Was it a male or female?
It was a female.
And do you remember whether they were white or black?
They were black, or almost black, I think. And I was almost white. So.
Do you remember whether the female had light color hair or dark hair?
She had darker hair. Cause her hair was was a lighter shade, darker.
Okay, but do you remember being kicked?
Yeah.
Okay, and how many times?
Once.
Okay, and where?
This side, I think. Yeah, this side.
Okay, excellent.
This was all presented for the department at the BRO hearing. They still found me guilty and terminated me. When the truth comes out, the killing stops. Why didn't you charge me with filing a false police report when I came forward stating that Evans kicked Mr. Christopher Gettler? You filed criminal charges against every other officer who was accused and terminated for filing a false police report. You didn't because you knew I was innocent, and a criminal court would find me innocent and expose your department for suppressing the truth and retaliation.
And the first victim, or one of the first two victims in this case, is the daughter of a retired LAPD captain who represented him in that disciplinary hearing. And so he feels like this captain, this former captain, sort of helped him out of the department, failed to properly defend him, and that's why he killed his daughter and her boyfriend. And that does seem to be the beginning of it in 2008.
The attacks will stop when the department states the truth about my innocence publicly. I will not accept any type of currency or goods in exchange for the attacks to stop, nor do I want it. I want my name back, period. There is no negotiation. The enemy combatants in LA are not the citizens and suspects, it's the police officers. People who live in glass houses should not throw stones. How ironic that you utilize a fixed glass structure as your command headquarters. You use a luminous building to symbolize that you are transparent, have nothing to hide or suppress, when in essence, concealing, omitting, and obscuring is your forte.
It's difficult. Any change is difficult, especially in an entrenched institution like a police department.
We talk with a lot of people on the police force who don't really seem to see a problem here.
Sure. It's a fresh wound. It's not there's gonna be level of denial. You're talking about people who have to admit that there was some wrongdoing. If they don't see that at all, then it's difficult to change them. And so most of the work is about how do you change the culture of police officers to prevent this.
Dorner names 7 Hollywood police officers in his manifesto as being among those he holds a grudge against. We've redacted their names. Dorner claims that while riding in a police van with other Hollywood Division officers, he overheard 2 cops use the N-word to describe an African American. Dorner says when he asked them to stop and when they refused, he says, quote, "At that point, I jumped over my front passenger seat and 2 other officers where I placed my hands around the officer's neck and squeezed. I stated to the officer, 'Don't effing say that.' What I should have done was put a Winchester 9mm bullet in his skull and the other officer's skull." Dorner claims Internal Affairs investigated the incident, but only one of the cops in the van took his side. He wrote, "The other 6 officers all stated they heard nothing and saw nothing. Shame on every one of you." Dorner claims the 2 accused officers got 22-day paid suspensions, and in return a complaint was filed against him, continuing what he believes is a culture of racism in the LAPD. He wrote, "That day the LAPD stated that it is acceptable for fellow officers to call black officers the N-word to their face, and you will receive a slap on the wrist."
In order for you and me to devise some kind of method or strategy to offset some of the events or repetition of the events that have taken place here in Los Angeles recently, we have to go to the root. We have to go to the cause. Dealing with the condition itself is not enough. And it is because of our effort toward getting straight to the root that people oftentimes think we're dealing in hate. We are oppressed. We are exploited. We are downtrodden. we are denied not only civil rights, but even human rights. So the only way we're going to get some of this oppression and exploitation away from us or aside from us is come together against the common enemy.
Dorner later made a hit list that included taking revenge on all the people involved in their case and their families.
Suspected of killing the assistant coach and her fiancé is former Los Angeles police officer Christopher Dorner.
Police are investigating whether it was Dorner who made a taunting phone call to retired police captain Randall Quan, allegedly telling Quan he should have done a better job protecting his daughter.
The first victims, Monica Quan and her fiancé Keith Lawrence, were killed Sunday, February 3rd.
A former LAPD officer wanted for a double murder in Irvine.
Now, Monica Quan and her fiancé Keith Lawrence were killed on Sunday after being shot multiple times in their car in Irvine. Her father, Randy Quan, also a former cop, was Dorner's defense attorney when he was fired from the LAPD back in 2008. And police say Dorner mapped out his mission to murder. He reportedly vowed to make the families of officers pay by, quote, terminating their families. Said he would attack them, their children's schools, and their spouses' workplace.
At first, the motive for killing Quan, an assistant basketball coach, and Lawrence, a police officer, was a mystery. The next day, in National City, California, near the Mexican border, a collection of police equipment is found in a dumpster: a gun belt, some ammunition, and Dorner's police name tag, and a notebook with the name Teresa Evans.
I was shocked at the first, because this is not everyday thing. You go, throw a trash, you find a magazine full of bullets.
A man believed to be accused killer Chris Dorner throwing things away in a dumpster behind the car customizing business. The video starts showing Dorner pulling up in his Nissan pickup, then watch as he gets out and starts throwing stuff in. An employee walked out to throw some trash away less than a half hour later.
He came back with a magazine full of bullets, a military belt, and a helmet, actually.
Yahye says he immediately took the ammo and other items to the National City Police Department, a short walk as the department is just across the street from his business. The next day, 2 detectives showed up to talk to Yahye, and they had one very important question for him.
They explained to me that it was a couple of murder cases up in Irvine, and so basically they asked me if I had a surveillance camera.
Fortunately, Yahye's answer was yes. Now he hopes his surveillance video can help in the immense effort to find Dorner.
I was very happy and excited that he showed up Monday morning, because if he would have come Sunday night, then the alley is completely dark. We wouldn't have anything.
Now, when police called Officer Evans, she told him that Dorner had made a complaint against her and been fired for making false statements. On Tuesday evening, in the police station's parking lot, she overheard officers talking about the Quan murder. Now, Evans made a connection there, but it was a long shot. She recalled that Quan's father had been Dorner's lawyer in the case. Evans contacted detectives, who then did internet searches and found that Facebook page that contained Dorner's hit list. Quan was on it. So was Evans.
A moment of silence was held in honor of a fallen teammate. Saturday, January 9th was the first time the Titans had played since their assistant coach Monica Quan was killed earlier that week. A memorial was set up at the entrance to the Titan gym, where attendees, faculty, and athletes could pay their respects to the assistant coach.
Our part of our family was missing. Coach Monica Quan is, I can't begin to tell you what it feels like to function without a part of your family here.
The players knew Quan as Coach Mo, and they felt like they lost a significant part of their family.
She was someone that we could all talk to, someone we could go to, and we could talk about things besides basketball. And so that was nice for all of us, and I think sometimes you take for granted like the little conversations that you have with people. And I think she was definitely someone that we could all go to and someone we could all talk to about anything that we needed to talk about. And so she was definitely more than a coach for all of us.
Supported all of us in almost everything we did. I mean, you came to practice and you were having a bad day, no matter what it was. She was always there for you and excited and happy. I know that through all the things we've all been through this year, without her, I'm not quite sure how I would have got through it, being injured and whatnot. She was always there for me. And I thought she was a great person.
The hunt was on for a gunman as Naval Base Point Loma went on lockdown.
Though the only fresh glimpse of the fugitive were new pictures taken 2 weeks ago. Surveillance cameras captured these images of Christopher Dorner. The trouble is, they were taken 2 weeks ago in Orange County, not far from where Monica Quan and her fiancé Keith Lawrence were murdered last Sunday. The last photos taken of Dorner before he disappeared. Signs like these, armed and dangerous, are on every freeway here, but so far no one has spotted him.
Control all units, seat info, reference 1199 for LAPD.
Tonight, a 10 News viewer came forward about a face-to-face encounter between Christopher Dorner and the hotel clerk who checked him in last week at this hotel at the Navy Base Point Loma.
Just a few minutes before we were supposed to talk to that woman who checked Dorner into the hotel here, Navy officials told her not to say a word, but her boyfriend, who knew the whole story, took us through the entire saga.
The first thing they wanted to know, did he have a Navy ID? Did he have a military ID? And he did.
But security didn't check if the ID was current or expired. This man's girlfriend, who doesn't want to be identified, says she came face to face with Chris Dorner last Tuesday while working the front desk at the Navy Gateway Inn and Suites in Point Loma.
He kept pointing his face away from the camera, trying to purposely avoid the cameras that were at the front desk. Like, keep putting his head away or facing the other way like that.
At the time, his girlfriend had no idea who Dorner was.
She wasn't scared at all. But now she's scared that he's going to come back there.
Dan also works on a naval base.
Base security is usually pretty lax. Half the time when you just go into the base, they just glance over your ID. Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead. They don't even look at the expiration date.
But not anymore.
I just know they beefed up security heavily. There's long wait lines outside to get outside all the bases right now. I've noticed them asking people questions, and they might request to see multiple IDs and really glancing them over.
A lot of people saying that maybe he's very familiar with this area and that he did check in here. What do you know about the familiarity of the suspect with this area?
Well, obviously he is very familiar with the area, and we have confirmation that he stayed here a couple of days ago. We also have confirmation that he may have been involved in that robbery earlier in the week here, or earlier last night. So he was in the area. That's why we are so concerned that he may return to the area.
We heard that perhaps a suspect had checked in here. Have you seen his vehicle here? Or is there surveillance video that would indicate that he was here for sure, at least at one point? Can you talk about that?
Well, obviously there's a lot of different facets to the investigation. One is that we are scouring the area for the vehicle. The other is that we are advising all agencies to be on the lookout for this suspect, and that's why you saw this response here today. So we are looking for the vehicle. We have not spotted that.
Suspect vehicle still outstanding. It's a black Nissan Titan.
Dorner tried to persuade some fishermen at the San Diego's Driscoll Wharf to take him fishing in Mexico by offering them $200 to $400. There were no takers, and Dorner even tried to throw in some fish tacos to sweeten the deal. The next day, Dorner tried to persuade some other fishermen. He then tied up an 81-year-old man while trying unsuccessfully to steal his boat. The same night, after the police released Dorner's description, the fisherman notified the police.
Just as surveillance video of Dorner surfaced showing him buying scuba gear 2 days before investigators say he began his killing spree. 10 News was the first to show you the video from TMZ at 5 o'clock. It shows Dorner entering the Sport Chalet in Torrance with 2 small scuba tanks, which he had filled with oxygen, along with a larger tank. Dorner was a member of the Naval Undersea Warfare Unit, and we know that last Wednesday night he tried and failed to hijack a boat in Point Loma to take to Mexico.
The calm of the coast, the serenity of the ocean. It's what helps make San Diego so beautiful. This is where fisherman Mike Flynn finds his solace.
I do spend more time on the water than the land.
But Flynn forever entangled in an infamous part of San Diego history.
That's because of a chance encounter here 10 years ago.
Yeah, I remember it still pretty vividly.
Flynn was working here at the docks in Point Loma back in February 2013. That's when he said he met the man, later identified as Dorner.
He came down and it was probably like about, I guess maybe about 2 in the afternoon. And he was just kind of walking around the docks, and he went down to one of the other docks, and I guess he was trying to find a boat.
At that point, Flynn knew nothing of the murders. For him, he was just helping a guy looking for a boat.
I kind of assumed he was ex-military or something just because of his demeanor, the way he carried himself, and had some like combat boots on. And I told him that my boat wasn't available, we're doing work on it.
So Dorner instead bought Flynn and a few others lunch. It was overall a pleasant experience, but looking back,
who knows what that would have been if you chartered my boat. You know, you might speculate or whatever, but I don't think maybe it was going to be a one-way trip for me.
Flynn was lucky. After lunch, he said Dorner went on his way. But that wasn't the case for another local man, a man in his 80s, held hostage aboard his boat by Dorner. He said he wanted the man to take him to Mexico. He tied him up, but his plan didn't work and Dorner took off. I spoke to that man over the phone.
10 years later, he said it's a day he wants to forget. He's just happy that now in his early 90s, he's still alive. It was after the story of that fellow boater became public, Flynn realized he may have dodged death.
It was funny, the next morning on the news, making my coffee and I'm looking at the television going, wait a minute, I've seen that guy before somewhere.
After a couple days on the run in San Diego, Dorner headed back north, murdering Riverside police officer Michael Crane in an ambush.
Christopher Dorner is wanted for a series of crimes, including assaults on officers and 3 homicides. The Los Angeles Police Department and our allied law enforcement agencies are implementing all measures possible to ensure the safety of our LAPD personnel, their families, and the Los Angeles community. We will continue to do so until Dorner is apprehended and all threats have been abated.
Dorner was on the move, heading north to Corona, where he's spotted by tow truck driver Lee McDaniel at a gas station. He watched Dorner leave, then spotted an LAPD cruiser nearby. He alerted the 2 officers inside. They were part of a protection detail in the Dorner manhunt. The officers followed Dorner onto the 15 freeway. Dorner got off at Magnolia Avenue. Without the officers knowing, he pulled over. When the LAPD cruiser came into view, Dorner opened fire with an assault rifle. The officers ducked for cover.
Officers returned fire, and 1 officer received a non-life-threatening wound to his head, a graze wound literally inches from killing him.
Dorner left the scene on Magnolia Avenue. 12 miles later, he reached Arlington Avenue in Riverside. That's where Riverside police officers Andrew Takias and Michael Crane were sitting at a red light in their patrol car. Never saw Dorner coming.
2 Riverside police officers have been shot, one of them killed, the other still in surgery right now. Basically, Lieutenant Toussaint telling us that they were not actively searching for Christopher Dorner at the time of the shooting. They were parked at a stoplight not far from here, and they were ambushed by this person.
Officer Crane, a husband and father of 2 young children, was killed. Sergio Diaz was the Riverside police chief at the time. He had to tell Officer Crane's wife he was gone.
Regina was Mike's wife. They had a little 2-year-old, I think, as I recall. We knocked on the door, and Regina answered the door, and she knew. He was extremely well respected, very well liked. You know, kind of. I mean, I hate to engage in stereotypes, but kind of a gentle giant type of, you know, a quiet but very effective and very professional police officer.
Officer Takias was shot 9 times. Somehow he survived. Now 10 years later, he spoke with Rob McMillan about those terrifying moments when Dorner opened fire.
The next thing I remember is our car is coming under fire. I saw the video. Our car is rolling through the intersection. I don't remember it ever rolling. But I remember Karam coming up, the taxi driver, to save me. And he puts the car in park for me. And that's when I realized this guy's here to help me. So I direct him to the radio and tell him to put it to my mouth so I could call for help.
1199, we're on Mag at Arlington. Officer shot multiple times.
And I just kept telling myself, stay awake. current Chief Gonzalez told me I was going in and out of consciousness, which I don't remember that, but to me, in my head, I was in the fight the whole time. And so I just kept telling myself, as long as you stay awake, you're going to live.
We are waiting to hear if there will be punishment for 8 Los Angeles police officers who opened fire on a pair of innocent women in the manhunt for cop killer Christopher Dorner.
At this point in the manhunt, a sense of panic sets in. Just hours after the ambush in Riverside, new developments 60 miles away in Torrance.
There were 2 officer-involved shootings. They occurred within minutes of each other and within blocks of each other, and it now appears that both are cases of mistaken identity. Behind me, you can see out there in the distance a blue pickup truck out there. It is riddled with bullets. Now, LAPD officers were here overnight, and they were here to protect a fellow officer who lives in this area. We're being told he is a captain, and they worried that he could be targeted by Christopher Dorner. Well, this truck resembled the suspect's vehicle, and the officers opened fire.
It was nearly a catastrophic mistake. Inside that truck were 2 women on their daily newspaper delivery route. One suffered gunshot wounds to her back, the other shot in the hand. Both would recover.
She travels with her headlights off so that when she pulls up into somebody's driveway and delivers the newspaper, she doesn't disturb them.
But that might be suspicious to police without the headlights.
Absolutely, and evidently that was her behavior this morning.
Tenía que yo andaba ese día. Aquí tiene un agujero.
For the first time in 5 years, Emma is telling her story, a story that has become a living nightmare.
Y en ese momentito fue muchas. Nos tiraron en las llantas, tiraban atrás, tiraban a los lados, a todos lados de la troca.
Dozens of shots were fired.
Yo pensé, dije, Dios mío, me matan a mi hija y se van a quedar los niños solos. Entonces yo dije, que me maten a mí.
Like any mama bear, 71-year-old Emma used her body to shield her 47-year-old daughter. She was hit twice in her back. Through the years, she's slowly recovering, but the strength is still not there.
Ya no soy fuerte. Mi mente no está bien. Cosas así dañan a uno todo su vida completa.
Her daughter, Margie, was also injured. She suffered cuts to her hand. She too wanted to share her story, but didn't want to show her face.
Tenerle miedo a todo el mundo. Salir en la madrugada sin saber si voy a regresar.
After the shooting, the 2 were awarded a settlement from the city of Los Angeles, $4.2 million. They tell me each of them got $1 million. Their attorney got the rest.
¿Para qué quiero el dinero? Yo vivía tranquila. Vivíamos tranquilos.
Moments later, just a few blocks away, Torrance police responding to the first shooting spot a dark-colored pickup leaving the scene. Believing the vehicle may be Dorner's, they fired at the driver.
Just starting to wake up, and all of a sudden I hear a bam, 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 and then a big bang.
The driver was not hit. Later, millions of dollars in legal settlements would be paid out to the victims of both these shootings.
It's not good when the cops are on edge. You know, it's not good when the cops are seeing ghosts everywhere.
That afternoon, it became clear Christopher Dorner was nowhere near Torrance. Christopher Dorner's burned-out truck has triggered an all-out search through the snow-covered forest around Big Bear Lake. After the ambush in Riverside, Dorner had fled in the opposite direction to the San Bernardino Mountains. A burned truck found later that morning near the Big Bear Mountain Ski Resort is quickly connected to Dorner. A new, massive search begins. Law enforcement, knowing Dorner is heavily armed, begins bringing in tactical units by helicopter. Nearby schools are placed on lockdown. A door-to-door search is underway, with authorities entering cabins that were either unlocked or that looked suspicious. But days go by with no new sightings and no new leads.
He could have been anywhere from frozen in a snowbank to sitting someplace in Mexico, or, you know, hunkered down around there, or any place, because we just didn't know.
And the couple he took hostage in those final hours are now speaking out for the first time.
He was holed up inside. They say he was heavily armed, that he tied their wrists and ankles, even covered their heads with pillowcases. For 15 minutes, they lay on the floor of their cabin, terrorized. Did at any time he talk to you about why he was doing what he was doing?
Yes, he had said, I just want to clear my name.
The couple only managed to break free when Dorner fled in their car.
Jim and Karen Reynolds owned several condos near the command post. Little did they know that Dorner had actually been hiding in one of their units right under the noses of law enforcement.
Across the street is the Bear Mountain parking lot, and that's where the Sheriff's Department had its command post for its massive manhunt and search over the past few days. And if you walk with me here, we're just a few hundred feet away from this set of cabins, and this was where Dorner was in fact holed up over the past few days.
10 years later, Jim and Karen Reynolds now live in Pennsylvania, but they remember February 12, 2013 like it was yesterday. The search had been scaled back. They were preparing their units for new renters, and that's when they entered one of their cabins and came face to face with Christopher Dorner.
And as soon as I turned, he came out the door of that bedroom with a gun in his hand.
I just heard her scream and turn and run. I turned back around, he come running by me.
And he rushed.
I could see the gun, and he's holding it up like in front of his chest at a 45-degree angle. Long.
Chasing me.
Had a silencer on it. He had us sit on the sofa, and then he started saying, well, calm down. If you do what I say, I won't hurt you. I don't have a problem with you. I have a problem with the police. Then he had to stand up, turn around,
kneel on the
face the wall, then kneel on the sofa and lean over until our heads are touching the wall. Put our hands behind our back, and that's when he bound our hands with those ties.
Our feet were bound, but also crossed. We had pillowcases on our heads. It was actually tucked under the cord he tied our mouths with.
So he was packing things up. It took him several minutes to do that. And then he left. We heard the door close. We just lay still for a few minutes, make sure he's gone before we start trying to get loose.
It took Jim and Karen about 15 to 30 minutes to free themselves. Using Karen's cell phone that Dorner had left behind, they called 911.
When did he tie you up?
Right before leaving, he tied us up. He had pillowcases over our heads. And
how long ago did he tie you up?
It was like 15 minutes to 30 minutes.
Dorner now has the Reynolds burgundy Nissan Rogue. Still heavily armed, he's on the move again, speeding down the mountain on Highway 38. But authorities have his vehicle description.
The vehicle taken is going to be a purple, maroon-colored Nissan Rogue.
He's spotted by a sheriff's unit, but before that unit can engage him, Dorner turns down Glass Road, now heading toward the bottom of the canyon. He decides to leave the stolen Nissan and stops a pickup driven by Rick Heltebrink, who works at a nearby Boy Scout camp, forcing him out at gunpoint. Dorner takes the pickup and continues down Glass Road, deeper into the canyon. When authorities find the abandoned Nissan, they know he's close by.
Vehicle's clear. There's a silenced sniper rifle sitting in the back seat.
Soon, he's spotted again by Fish and Wildlife game wardens, and there's an exchange of gunfire.
Fishing game was shot at, and they returned fire. Subject continue on.
Law enforcement from across Southern California raced to the scene. San Bernardino County Sheriff's Deputy Alex Collins and his partner drove down Glass Road, then turned onto Seven Oaks Road. Collins' partner spotted fresh tire tracks in the snow.
He's like, hey, I was down here earlier in the day or the day prior. He's like, those tire tracks, weren't there. Like, something's weird. I think we should check these cabins out.
Hiding out in one of those cabins was Dorner. Without warning, gunfire erupted.
Clear the air, we got shots fired.
Deputy Collins was hit multiple times.
The first round actually hit me in the face. It went in right at next to my left nostril, went through the roof of my mouth, blew my teeth out, through my tongue. I get hit in the chest, and then I was shot in the left forearm, and then I turned to take cover.
Collins was able to run behind a vehicle. Dorner's shots coming from a powerful rifle with a suppressor. The bullets kept coming.
The tire was shot. It started hissing air. One of the rounds skipped from under the car and hit me in my right hand.
Meanwhile, Detective Jeremiah McKay was guiding a sheriff's helicopter to the scene and returning fire. As the gunfight raged on, an armored vehicle arrived at the scene to provide cover. Gas canisters were fired into the cabin. Calls to surrender were made to Dorner over a loudspeaker. Then, a decision to fire pyrotechnic gas into the cabin. The gas ignited.
Not in all instances do these devices cause a fire.
but weighing the situation and trying to get an effective amount of chemical agent into that cabin to try to get Mr. Dorner to surrender, this was our only option.
Roughly 10 minutes after the fire started, officers heard a single gunshot from inside the cabin. The fire raged for hours, and Christopher Dorner was dead.
The information that we have right now seems to indicate that the wound that took Christopher Dorner's life was self-inflicted.
I cannot absolutely positively confirm it's him. The suspect that we were following and also had stolen the vehicle matched his description. His behavior, based on our deputy's interaction with him inside the vacant cabin, was consistent with Mr. Dorner's activity prior to, and we're not currently involved in a manhunt any longer.
Investigators were initially unsure how Christopher Dorner died. Did he kill himself? Was he killed by a deputy's bullet? Or did he perish in the smoke and flames?
Investigators combed through the remains of the burned-down cabin.
During the autopsy yesterday, the doctor who conducted the process concluded that the cause of death was a single gunshot wound to the head. We are not at this point ready to speak about the manner of death and tell you whether or not that it was as a result of a self-inflicted wound or another round.
Was that blaze an accident, or did law enforcement set it on purpose?
We're getting a first look at the charred remains of the cabin where alleged cop killer Christopher Dorner made his last stand on Tuesday. We were there, caught in the crossfire. The gun battle was so intense, we were forced to take cover, but we left our cell phone on. At the very beginning of the shootout, you can hear authorities near the phone talking about burning Dorner out of the cabin he was holed up in.
Burn that out. Get going right now. Burn this.
Over the next 3 hours, authorities brought in reinforcements, armored vehicles, more SWAT teams, and this battering ram, which authorities told me at the scene would be used to deploy a powerful form of tear gas, also known as a burner, into the cabin. The burner gives off intense heat, which often causes a fire. Recordings of police scanners during the final assault confirmed their plan.
We're going to go forward with the plan with the burner, like we talked about. 7 burners deployed, and we have a fire.
Despite those recordings, the day after the shootout, San Bernardino County Sheriff John McMahon insisted
That it was not on purpose. We did not intentionally burn down that cabin to get Mr. Dorner out.
We've repeatedly asked the Sheriff's Department for a response, but no one has returned our calls. Here at headquarters today, they have declined to answer any questions.
The tear gas canisters that we used, first off, we used a presence when we showed up. Secondly, we used a cold tear gas. Then we used, the next tear gas was that was pyrotechnic. Does generate a lot of heat. We introduced those canisters into the residence, and a fire erupted.
We asked a representative from the San Bernardino Sheriff's Office to join us, but they declined. Norm Samper, former police chief of Seattle, and the author of Breaking Rank, a top cop's expose of the dark side of American policing. Can you react to how the San Bernardino Police Department dealt with Dorner, the burning down of the cabin? What is your understanding of what happened and what was used?
Well, I think the sheriff has articulated what might be seen as escalating levels of force. He started with the mere presence of the deputies, presumably surrounding that cabin. Then they used cold tear gas, so-called cold tear gas. And then they went to the pyrotechnic version, or the incendiary version of CS gas. And whether it was intentional or not, a very predictable outcome of deploying 7 burners in what appears to have been a wooden cabin would predictably leave it in rubble.
Do you think they should have done that?
You know, I'm not going to second guess it, but I think over the days and weeks ahead, it's imperative that that agency and the rest of the country, all of us riveted by what happened there, understand what decisions were made and why they were made. I can tell you that I'm troubled by the use of incendiary chemical agents. By definition, these pyrotechnic versions of tear gas start fires. They are intended for outdoor use. They are not intended for contained structures, particularly wooden structures. Another observation that I think bears real careful examination, and that is the almost hysterical command to use those burners. The expletives that were used begin to suggest that emotion rather than professionalism, rather than a calm and deliberate approach to extracting Mr. Dorner, if in fact that was possible, were simply not used.
Because there is a lot of controversy stirring on the internet about a video. It's an unconfirmed, it's actually audio, unconfirmed audio of the incident that happened yesterday. And it allegedly has police officers talking about how they're going to set the cabin on fire.
Tear that whole wall down, that door and that window. Make a big port window for me there. All right, Steve, we're gonna go forward with the plan with the burner. 7 burners deployed and we have a fire.
Copy, 7 burners deployed and we have a fire.
Guys, be ready on the number 4 side. We have fire in the front. You might come out the back. It sounded like one shot fired from inside the residence.
Copy, 1 shot fired from inside the residence. Confirming you still want fire to roll in?
Roll in and stage.
That is a telling piece of audio.
Indeed.
And again, I do want to mention again that it's unconfirmed, but if cops did intentionally set the cabin on fire, you have some issues there.
At that point, it could be just bravado, but again, there's no operating plan that calls for torching a home in order to get a suspect out.
The term burners heard on the audio was once used as slang for tear gas canisters, though police generally no longer use gas that can catch fire.
Well, obviously, we want to gas the individual out of the house. They're non-incendiary type devices, so they wouldn't have any possibility of catching the house on fire.
I don't advocate any kind of hate.
But there's a lot of talk that sounds very much like it.
No, I think that the guilt complex of the American white man is so profound until when you begin to analyze the real condition of the black man in America, instead of the American white man eliminating the causes that create that condition, he tries to cover it up by accusing his accusers of teaching hate. But actually, they're just exposing him for being responsible for what exists. I'm against any form of segregation and against racism, complete brotherhood of all people. But at the same time that I believe in this brotherhood, I don't believe in forcing my desire for brotherhood upon those who aren't willing to accept it.
Of course, I think the Christians would say that they also believed in brotherhood. What did you say to that?
I'd say they believe in it, but don't practice it.
That'd be a pretty good answer.